Hi, I'm Lori Jones, and this is StrategyCast, where smart marketers and bold business thinkers share the plays behind brand breakthroughs. Today, I'm joined by someone whose career reads like a masterclass in strategic marketing, Nicole Portwood. From building purpose-driven cult brands to driving billion-dollar growth stories, Nicole's held the top seat at companies like Mountain Dew, Tito's Vodka, Live Nation, Salad & Go, and is the new CMO of Suja Life. In this episode, we're going to deep dive into one idea. You can't lead marketing if you don't understand the business. We'll kick things off with how Nicole sees marketing as a business function, not a service. And from there, we'll explore curiosity as a leadership tool, her go-to strategy questions across departments, and what it really means to be a better at than everyday skills that drive impact. Welcome to StrategyCast.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Thank you, Lori. It's so wonderful to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
I tell you, I'm so excited. We've had a couple pre-show discussions, and you are wicked smart. You have so much to share on so many different topics. It was kind of hard, to deduce what we should talk about and could talk about, but I'm glad that we landed in something that's a real passion for you. We've talked a little bit about your journey with some really, really well-known companies. Tell us a little bit more about your passion for marketing and what really drove you in each of those roles.
Sure. Well, thank you for the kind words. I do appreciate it. And I'm excited to share some of what I've learned on this crazy journey. But I started my career on the agency side and actually coming out of the beginnings as an artist. I was an actor in New York for a while and then decided that that was not a path for me. And I think there are some pretty translatable skills between being an actor who's sort of studied human motivation and being a marketer, where you're really trying to leverage human motivation in the name of commerce. So I was on the agency side for about 10 years, and that's where I was introduced to the world of distilled spirits, which I just absolutely fell in love with. I love the lifestyle of it, but I think more importantly, as a marketer, I love the role brand played in that work. And this was, of course, before any kind of access to data, before streaming services existed or anything like that. And so brand was the thing that set your business apart from all the other choices that were out there. And it was, I think, a real deep education very, very early in my career on how brand can be this powerful business tool. So from the agency side to go work at Tito's Vodka down in Austin, Texas, and help to grow that business into the juggernaut that it is today, which was the wildest, most wonderful ride. I was there for almost 9 years, had an opportunity to build the marketing organization and the capability within the company. And by the time I left, we were the single largest selling spirit in the whole country, not just vodka, all spirits. It was just such a joy. I love that brand still. Yeah. The people are so great. The brand is so great. There's so much to love there. And that is one thing I would say in general about my career is I've left places with a lot of love in my heart. And I wish that for everyone, because it's the best thing to be able to look backward and say, I still have all these terrific relationships and I learned so much, and I can call on all of these people in these institutions throughout my career at different inflection points. From Tito's, I went to PepsiCo to run the Mountain Dew business. It was my pivot away from the distilled spirits world. I think after the Tito's experience, it would be really hard to beat that in the world of spirits. So the Mountain Dew experience was a wild one as well for lots of different reasons. That was a transformation. The brand had been in decline for 8 years when I showed up. And
Wow.
It was a transformation remit. It was, we've got to fix this. We've got to turn it around. And they deliberately brought in someone from the outside, which is pretty rare for PepsiCo. And we did it. We did it. Yeah, thank you. It was really hard. Like no lie, going from a 300 person to a 250,000 person organization was challenging in its own right. Maybe we can have another conversation about how you manage that sort of transition. But I loved it and I learned so much. And we did turn the business around for lots of really great reasons, lots of very hard work by lots of really smart people. Then I went to work at Live Nation, where I was the chief brand officer. As I mentioned, I am an artist. I still consider myself an artist in many ways. I'm married to a professional musician. And so the arts play a huge role in our lives. And that was such a fun experience to get to kind of blend those two loves. So naturally, then you go work for Jennifer Lopez, of course, just kind of combining.
Why not?
Why not, right? Yeah. But I was the general manager for her J.Lo brand, which is a bottled cocktail brand that she owned the company. We launched it together in stealth. And then I kind of handed over those operations to a larger company and went to work at Salad & Go, which is a health-focused, mission-oriented company that aims to address the conflict between affordability, accessibility, and wellness. And as I've gotten older and have really tried to connect my work to the things that are deeply important to me personally, this was such a fabulous experience and a kind of eye-opening to feel how good it feels to wake up every day doing something that is powerful in your own life and getting to bring that to more people. And that carries through to my latest opportunity, which is a CMO of Suja Life, which is fresh pressed juices, wellness shots, and the launch of the new probiotic soda slice, which is a bit of a throwback, but totally reformulated. So that's in a nutshell.
Love it. I mean, such an incredible background, and you're such, an amazing marketer. I mean, it's you can just tell by the roles that you've held. You said something very early on and kind of teased it throughout some of these introductions of your roles, and you mentioned brand a lot. And I think a lot of people misplace brand from the hierarchy of where it sits and the need for it to impact through the marketing funnel. Just how important is brand these days? You see a lot of people talking about GTM and kind of bypassing the need for top of funnel input and awareness. And just what's your gut reaction to all this anti-brand discussion that's taking place?
Yeah, I think it is because for some marketers, brand exists as its own thing. And brand on its own, I can understand skepticism around its value because it feels very nebulous. It feels very sort of, this is a really great intellectual exercise, but what impact is it actually having on the business? I believe brand and marketing have to go hand in hand, and one without the other just does not have the same kind of impact. If you've got marketing activation that you're churning out and you're connecting people, you got all this lower funnel stuff that's driving sales, that's great. But what it's not doing is building relationships, building affinity, building differentiation, and building
sustaining.
Right. You're not building pricing power. Like if we want to break it down to the real business value, you're not building pricing power. We also know from tons and tons of research that companies that trade on public stock exchange, companies that have strong brands trade on average 33% higher than companies that don't. There's a reason, right?
Yeah.
Like there's
it's equity build. I mean, it's valuation. Yeah.
And it's the thing that makes someone choose you over anybody else, particularly in commoditized categories, right? So I think they've got to go hand in hand. But again, I think marketers mistake the sort of creative and relationship building side of brand as they kind of think that's the sole purpose, when really, truly what you're trying to do is deliver business value. And you have to be able to speak that language and translate those brand awareness and affinity scores into real hard value for the company.
Yeah. Something that's meaningful.
Yes.
Something that you've been very, very outspoken about is how the org chart within an organization really is a signal to whether marketing is truly seen as a driver of growth. Yeah. Talk to us about that and some of those epiphanies that you've had along the way.
Yeah. So when you look at the org chart, it's very simple. Does marketing as a function report directly to the CEO? Or does it report into COO? Does it report into a chief growth officer? Like, where does marketing sit within the organization? And that will tell you everything about how the company at large views marketing. If it is a sub-function of another area of expertise, then it's not viewed as a business driving function. And the leader of that organization does not have a seat at the table when major strategic decisions about the business as a whole are being made. And that means that you are going to be informed after the fact on essentially a need to know basis about the things that are happening in the business writ large that someone else thinks are important to marketing, versus marketing having a seat at that table, a voice in leadership, a voice in those strategic decisions and the direction of the company, and then a fully informed perspective from which to develop marketing plans and drive marketing budgets and do all of those things. I've seen it, lots of times, but whenever I'm considering an opportunity, it's maybe the first question I ask is what's the reporting structure? And even when I wasn't at the C level, I wanted to know, did the CMO who was in place report to
SEs? Yeah.
Yeah, that tells you everything you need to know. And for me, it's not been worth it to work in spaces where marketing isn't a driving business function, because you just don't have what you need to do your job well.
Gut reaction and a guess, I know. But what percent of companies out there do you think have correct reporting mechanisms in place?
I would say it's probably the majority of them don't have marketing as a seat at the table and have marketing as a service function to sales, primarily operations, depending on what category you're in. Yeah.
That's an issue. I mean, I have seen it work on occasion with really smart sales leaders who are marketers as well.
Yes.
They're just trying to build out the function. But to your point, you don't have that direct discussion or line to the CEO, and it really can, provide a not just a misappropriation of people, but a misalignment and ultimately what can impact top line revenue.
People are like, why does marketing need to know what's going on in supply chain?
Yeah.
That's really important for me to know what's going on in supply chain, because first of all, if we're having an ingredient issue, there's probably going to be a consumer communications piece associated with that. If we're thinking about making a change in supplier, if we have a partnership with a vendor of a specific component of whatever it is that we're making and selling, and they have something really cool going on, or we see trends happening in culture that they're connected to, there's tons of opportunity there. It's not a sort of selfishness about information. It's let us exponentially expand our impact by understanding all the different pieces of the business. And I think leadership in general has a natural curiosity about marketing because it's the most human of the things that we do as a company. I think even more human than human resources, quite honestly. So there's always like an affinity and a curiosity about it across the board. But the expectation isn't usually that marketing has that curiosity about everybody else. And I think I really do.
For our listeners and viewers today who are either running to grab their org charts right now or visually know just in their mind that they're not right, provide them some insights on why marketing is a core business driver and some ammunition, if you will, on having some of those discussions with the leaders.
Yeah. And I will caveat this by saying you're not always going to be able to change things. A lot of it has to do with who's sitting in that top seat and the experiences they've had and what their belief systems are, and belief systems as it relates to marketing and marketing as an impactful business function. I've had the sincere privilege of working with incredible leaders who do understand the value of brand and have centered it in how they run the entire organization. There are lots of ways that we can show value as marketers. I think translating value into business impact and making the case for why marketing has to be one of those core functions is a much harder task to do if you have a leadership team that doesn't necessarily believe in it. I would say it's about asking for that seat at the table, even if it's just as a fly on the wall to listen so that you can be more well-informed. You can actually go about it as in a way to say, I'm going to take off your plate the need to debrief me after this. If I can just be in the room.
There you go.
Yeah,
right? That's simple.
In the room, then you get a little braver, have something to say about something. I'm a big fan of sort of, what's the word? Firmly but kindly requesting the access that you need to do your job. And I think
be a no-brainer. You know what I mean? It really should.
It should. Yeah. And again, I'm fortunate to be in a position in my career where I've had some terrific successes and worked with amazing teams to be able to kind of pull that forward and say, listen, based on my experience, this is what's required in order to achieve the goals that we're attempting to achieve. You can also really be clear about what that trickle down looks like, especially if you're an organization using agencies. The information funnel gets smaller and smaller and smaller the further away you get from the big picture. And if the expectation is that I'm going to be able to effectively make investments that are working for us most efficiently, most impactfully, way down here at the skinniest part of the funnel, I've got to have as much of this information as possible to make really good decisions down there. And like I said, you're not always going to be able to convince people, but there's a good business case for it.
But what you can do is say no to the job,
100%.
because I really do think that if more I mean, as you know, one of my passions is to help increase longevity among marketers in business.
Yep.
And one of the reasons why there is not longevity is exactly the problem that we're talking about here. They don't have a direct seat at the table that is needed. So if marketers start saying no to those positions, and they start ultimately, the C-suite, it will wake up the C-suite. And that's exactly what needs to be done here.
Yeah. And I think there's been an ebb and flow between the relationships of marketers and CEOs over the years.
Yeah.
We're in a moment now where I think we're in a bit of an upswing, where the C-suite is seeing more and more the value of brand, the value of marketing. And part of that just has to do with how complicated things have got in the media and communications landscape. Part of it has to do with striving for differentiation and trying to get traction in a really competitive marketplace, particularly when the economy gets tough, when discretionary spending gets tighter. That's when things heat up and boardrooms are looking for better ways to differentiate, better ways to drive impact. And you can't always just build a better mousetrap, right? Sometimes it is what it is. The product, the service is what it is. And you've got to find a better way to connect people to drive choice.
Which leads us to this great idea of having a seat at the table isn't always enough. You've gotten to, ultimately to earn it. You've got to earn it daily. You call it the tour of curiosity. Let's dig into what that means in action. I love this idea.
Yeah, so it is, you're right. Even if you have that seat at the table, you have to keep earning it.
Right.
And that means that you have to continue to connect with your cross-functional peers with a mindset of curiosity and a generative creative capability that doesn't always sit within your lane. So I've been in, executive leadership meetings where we're talking about things that on the surface seem to have nothing to do with marketing, whether that's, a human resources decision that needs to be made, a supply chain or equipment decision that needs to be made, an information technology decision that needs to be made. And because I've done enough understanding of what's happening with everyone else, I'm able to contribute meaningfully to those conversations.
Right.
So in the beginning of a new role, I think it's the most critical time to do this, but you can't just ask questions one time and think that you've done it. It is an ongoing commitment, this tour of curiosity. It's walking the halls, even virtual halls, right? Like just asking for time with people just to catch up and learn what's on their mind. You've got to listen. You've got to ask really, really, really good questions that in some ways they're very self-serving because they give you information you need to do your job better, but they also help build relationships with people.
Yeah.
For lack of a better way to say it, you have to embed yourself in the cross-functional lifeblood of the company, right?
Yeah.
You've got to be one of the important people in the room. And so not only does that give you a ton of information, but there are three kind of key deliverables that happen when you allow yourself to be vulnerable. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's talk about something really quick here that I think is really important. So you mentioned supply chain. You've got a relationship with supply chain. So supply chain has a problem with delivery of a component that is going to cause you not to be able to deliver product on time to client, 200 clients. Marketing has to have a seat at the table configuring out the right kind of communication with that. You've got HR who's laying off, 10 employees due to performance issues. And guess what? There's a risk of them, getting involved in social media and causing issues there. With that relationship, HR is going to include you in the conversation. It goes on and on and on and on. I think probably HR and marketing touch more across departments than any other department within an organization, if you think about it.
Finance as well.
Finance, yeah. Well, but more the reason to make sure that communication is taking place.
Yes. Yeah. Because it's not just about being informed. It's also about being able to provide a perspective as your cross-functional peers are trying to figure out what to do in their role. So the HR example is a great one. If you're going to be laying off these 10 people, it might be important for the marketing leader to see what the language is that you're going to use and to provide some input in the case that language gets screenshotted and posted to social media. It's like, how about maybe we say it like this, because that matches better with our company ethos, with the language that we're using in all of our press releases, et cetera. It's a two-way street.
Yeah. And to that point, these 3 reasons are really key. We've just illustrated them in practice, but if you'd walk through them, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Sure. So the first is, and I've kind of beat this one like a dead horse, you understand the business challenges more holistically.
Yeah.
That means you just be better at your job. And you'll find you have more ideas about how to solve business problems when you have the whole picture. The second one is that it allows you to earn trust with people, and trust builds influence. That trust comes from being vulnerable and asking questions and being genuinely curious about other people's agendas, other people's challenges. People love to be heard. It's a true thing. And it's a very important thing when you're dealing with that human dynamic in business. And the third thing is related to trust, but it's a little bit different, is that you gain allies. And when you have allies in the boardroom, that's what makes achieving big, bold agendas possible. You have to have the people in the room on your team. And when you've asked for their thoughts, when you've solicited their opinions, when you've heard them out on the things they're challenged with, they feel a vested interest in your success and are therefore more likely to rally behind the things you're fighting for, you know what I mean? Advocating for at the table.
Well, and it really helps you not always be in the bullseye as well, because let's face facts, marketing is quite often. And I mean, if you're building that trust and that influence that you mentioned, which I absolutely love, then you're having those deeper conversations that make, opening the doors far more meaningful as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's a temptation here to be like, well, why do I have to be the one to go ask all these questions? Why isn't anybody coming to me and asking me questions? And okay, sure. Like if you want to, you can be that way, but I don't think it's going to serve you well in business. You just have to accept that marketing is not always seen as a business function in the same way that others are. And it's your responsibility to do something about that.
That's exactly right. And if you really key into what Nicole is mentioning here, you're going to position marketing as the lever that truly can influence, build trust, and have a seat at the table, ask smart business questions, so on and so forth, and increase longevity. I mean, that's the goal, is longevity. I can't talk about that enough on this show. It's absolutely important, but you do need to think like a strategist. So next, Nicole is really going to walk us through these departmental questions that are really important to ask. So get your pen, get your laptop, get your notebook, hit record, whatever you can, because you're going to want this list to look at every day at your desk and making sure that you're showing up the way that you absolutely should. So first of all, we're going to break this down categorically by finance, operations, supply chain, product, sales, and talent and people. So let's hit the questions that we need to be asking finance.
Yeah. So this is a starter list. It's by no means exhausted, but it's a way to kind of get you thinking about how you can probe and ask questions that are going to give you some meaningful responses. So for finance, I think 3 of the most important questions are: what are our biggest financial levers as a business? You as a marketer need to understand what's the most profitable dollar that comes through the door, and how does the financial leader of the company see the different sectors of the business and prioritize those. The second question is, where do you see investment opportunities? That's going to signal to you the lowest hanging fruit in terms of growth. Where does this financial leader see an opportunity to kind of double down on perhaps things you're already doing, or look for market expansion in a category of business that is similar but not already something that you're doing? That one is really, really eye-opening. It also helps you understand whether they're seeing that as an investment opportunity because there's a challenge there, or because there's untapped potential there. And those are 2 different things. But again, it's going to help you to kind of understand where they're training their focus. And then the third question that I have for finance as a place to start is, how do you measure marketing's impact on revenue and profit?
Yeah.
That's probably the meatiest one. And I am not suggesting that you train everything you're doing to satisfy the finance team, not in the slightest. But by understanding their perspective on the actual empirical impact that the work you are doing is having on the business itself, it will help you better explain what you're trying to accomplish. If you can put it in terms that are aligned to how they understand marketing's impact on revenue and profit, it's much, much simpler. You have to kind of speak their language, right? And understand how they're thinking about it.
And then you can understand the red flags that, we may not, or they'll even present them to you more often, include you in them more often as well. So I think something that is very interesting about these finance questions is this. If your budget is too low for marketing, yet you are involved in conversations about investment opportunities, how do you have those discussions about misalignment there?
I think you have to be very, very honest about what's possible with the resources that you have. And if you've got the authority and the integrity and the trust of the people around the room, you can say, listen, I understand we're in a situation with finite resources. Let's talk realistically about the puts and takes. What's most important to the business? Because I can't accomplish all 16 of these things. With the resources that we have, I can accomplish 9 of them. Let's talk together as a team about which 9 are the most important. And that is a different way of approaching it than just being a sulking marketer in the corner saying, well, I don't have enough money to do everything you told me. No. There's never enough money. You could give us $10 billion. We could spend every penny of it, right? Like marketing is unique in that way. About 75% of the dollars we spend are variable. Whereas for pretty much every other function within a company, about 75 of the dollars they spend are fixed and are required to do the business, right? Marketing investment is variable. And that's why it's always the first thing to go, because it's not committed to just get whatever the product or service is out the door. That's collaborative discussion.
Yeah, I love it. It's all about communication, people. We talk about this constantly in everything we do. Moving into operations, one of the first questions that you really key in on here is what tools help you lead change effectively?
Yes. So again, this sort of helps you understand how an operations leader is taking priorities and pulling them through their whole org. In my experience, operations tends to have the most complicated organizational structure, and they tend to have the most levels within that structure, particularly if you're operating in a space that has either any sort of retail component, a manufacturing component, anything like that. The operations team is going to span from the C-suite all the way typically to like part-time entry-level team members. And so how that leader communicates and affects change within their org, whether it's literally like pieces of communication, physical tools, meetings and agendas, events that they're hosting, whatever it is, it's vitally important that those things be completely connected to the consumer communication side of things, and then also the kind of internal corporate communication side of things. I've found remarkable success in partnering with operational leaders on creating those tools. And it's also really helpful because what motivates internal team members often mirrors what motivates consumers, because guess what? We're all just people, right?
Exactly. And then you've got 2 more questions here. What's been a tough ops decision that paid off, and how does info actually flow in your organization?
Yeah. So tough decisions. Again, I want to know, where did you stick your neck out and why? And what did it achieve? That helps me understand how you're thinking about how you deliver growth to the company or deliver success to the company, which means I can better understand where I can dock in on that and help support you. And then how information flows helps me understand at what level do I need to bring what fidelity of information to ensure that whatever's happening on the marketing side and that agenda actually flows through the org as well. And can I provide those tools? Can I deploy my team directly within the operations organization to ensure that there's partnership and alignment there, just by understanding how that all works?
Bring us back to Mountain Dew very quickly, and some of these operations discussions that were taking place at the time to really turn the brand around.
Yeah. So, gosh, there were lots of conversations happening both on the kind of commercial marketing side of things, which is the retail partnership side, as well as on the product development and innovation side of things. Beyond that, we also had some SKU rationalization that had to happen. We had just way over innovated. We were cannibalizing our own shelf space. And so in that situation, it was more kind of like operations and sales combined together. The operational side of things about getting the product where it needed to go and discussing, truck space and delivery timelines and, retail floor displays for our recent innovations and how we were going to actually make good on that. And then on the sales side, obviously helping to narrow in on the sales story that not only looked at those tactical pieces, but also wove in all the work we were doing to make Mountain Dew a meaningful brand and culture again, which was, quite frankly, I can't say it was the biggest issue because there were lots of big rocks that were challenges for that brand. Brand was one of them, but overproliferation of innovation and ignoring the core was another. An understanding of the consumer journey and where they were in life stage was another big one. And innovation in terms of meeting people's modern needs was another big part of it. So no way we could have done it without total cross-functional collaboration.
Yeah, in a big way. Supply chain, I'll let you go through those questions.
Sure. So a lot of this has to do with, I mentioned kind of seeing opportunities for promotions and things like that, but there are such incredible stories in supply chain. Different companies have different willingness to tell those stories externally. But for me, particularly working in food and beverage, there's a lot of consumer safety and, ingredient authenticity and things like that are really, really important to people. So I want to know, what standards are we holding our suppliers to? Is there a story there? Even if it's like a business trade side story, can we tell a story about, this is our code of ethics. This is our code of sustainability. Every single one of our suppliers has to meet these, whatever they are. There's another question I like to ask is, what part of our supply chain are you most proud of? Asking people what they're most proud of is a gateway to get them to gush about the stuff that they've accomplished, about the people on their team that they just absolutely adore, who've done great work. And again, I think it's a way to find stories to tell about the brand. And then the third question I always ask is, what are the contingency plans if a supplier fails us? And so not only did they they didn't deliver this thing, or maybe there's a health scare. Like I said, I work in food and beverage, and that's always something you have to be concerned about. I need to know upfront, what's the situation if we enter into a crisis? Because I'm the one who's responsible for the crisis comms around that. So I need to know, what's the responsibility delineation between us and the supplier? Right. Where are they going to be willing to come and support us in consumer communication? How quickly can I count on them for updated information about what they're doing to resolve it, and then communicate that out to consumers?
I'm having an epiphany because I'm writing a crisis comms plan right now and developing a crisis tree for a client. How often do you have those sorts of tools already developed so that when there is a product issue, or there is an ops issue, or an HR or supply chain issue, the crisis tree is already in place? You know exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to tackle it.
It has to be there. It has to be there. And this has happened where I've come into an organization and it doesn't exist, it's one of the first things I do. Because you can't make great decisions in that kind of pressure when you're scared. It's not possible. So being able to keep a cool head, being calm in those situations, bringing the right people to the table to make decisions quickly. And it's not just that it's there, it's that everybody knows what to do. It's like doing a fire drill, right?
Absolutely.
You just have to be ready. You have to be ready with it. And it's one of those things, you hope it gathers dust on the shelf and you never have to use it. But I've had to use it multiple times in my career. And there's a comfort and a security in knowing everybody knows what their job is here. We're not going to get freaked out. Yes, it's okay to be emotional and concerned and worry. Of course, those are human reactions. But we've got a job to do. We have to protect the company. We have to, of course, protect consumers if there is an issue that could harm them in any way. We got to know what to do. We got to know what we're going to say about it. We got to know who's going to be responsible for everything.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Product.
Yes. Okay. So product, I can also mean service. I want to be clear about that. I do happen to work in the world where we make physical things, but sometimes we don't. Live Nation. Well, I guess you could consider a concert a physical thing, but not really, or a ticket a physical
entertainment. Yeah.
So understanding how we incorporate insights into product development, because that, in a best case scenario, the same consumer insights that are driving our marketing and communications planning should be driving product innovation as well. Understand where markets are going, where consumer tastes are going. All of that should be part and parcel. Too often they're not. And so if the answer to that is I don't know what you're talking about, then that starts you on a journey of how do we better connect these things? I think asking a product person, do people really understand what it is that we're offering?
Not agree more. Oh my gosh. What is it that we are selling?
What do we make? Yeah. What are we selling?
Exactly.
And again, even
Yeah.
if it's a service, I think this one may be
Yeah.
even more appropriate if it's a service, because service can sometimes be very nebulous.
It is nebulous, and I think it makes it harder.
Yes, agreed, agreed. And yeah, I mean, you understand better than anyone working in the agency.
Yeah.
Like, we can do whatever you need us to. That's unhelpful. How do you
Yeah.
really define it? And then a sort of shortcut to get under the hood on that is ask the person responsible for a product, explain it to me like I've never heard of it. Like,
Yeah.
explain it to me like I'm a toddler and I don't know anything about this thing that we do. That will pull out the things that they think are most important about
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, as a marketer, you're looking for the threads to pull on. Where are the stories? Where are the things that people think are interesting?
Yeah.
And it's wild because sometimes you'll get answers for that have nothing to do with the way you talk about the product to consumers. And it's a great way to kind of get you thinking creatively about additional opportunities, or in saying, hey, there's a huge disconnect here. We've been selling this, whatever it is, this way. Person in charge of making the thing says it's this.
Yeah.
Why is that happening? Right.
Well, and quite often, I think on transitioning into the next section here, which is sales, you can really understand what the disconnect between the product team is and sales quite often with some of these questions. What's your go-to story or data point when pitching? That should very much tie into the product team deducing it down to, this is why it's meaningful. This is why it's important.
And if they're saying different things,
Exactly.
okay, can I be a bridge to help bring those two things together? And
Yeah.
what is the sales organization? What's the number one objection that the sales organization is hearing when they're unable to close the sale? That's a big question. That's a big question, because then as the marketing team, you can help them address that through insights, through tools, through storytelling, through case studies, through results on the consumer side of things. You can help them address some of those outages. And I think too, with sales, historically and unfortunately, I think sales and marketing are the two orgs that butt heads most within a company. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the sales organization is out there in the field, in the market, maybe not physically. They're talking to external people constantly about our products and services, and they are steeped in the real world. And I think often there is a perception that marketers sit up in an ivory tower and they don't actually know what it's like down here in the streets, right? And it's real and it's fair. But if we can commit to understanding each other and commit to being partners with one another and commit to truly collaborating on solutions, it is extraordinarily powerful. And it's been one of the biggest priorities for me as I've gone through my career, is to develop really, really strong relationships with the sales team. Because again, they're activating the business,
Right.
in sort of a parallel way to how we activate the business on the marketing side of things. And we have got to be holding hands and speaking the same language.
You want to have one another's back.
Totally.
Because we truly are support programs to one another. And it's just all too often we see that's not the place. Finally, and as we alluded to earlier in our conversation, the most important thing is talent and people.
Yeah.
Because none of this works if it's not going to be delivered correctly, developed correctly, sold correctly.
Well, I think sometimes we forget that every single employee, team member, whatever they're called in your organization, is an ambassador for the brands, whatever it is. They are the front line in telling people about this awesome thing you do.
Yeah.
And if you're not building a culture of people who are fans of your own brands, then you're missing out on the largest group of evangelists you could possibly have.
Yeah.
Something that we found very true at Tito's, something I took very much to heart. I personally onboarded a majority of the sales team as that organization grew, onboarded them in terms of what's the brand, not onboarded them in terms of sales training. That is not what I do. I'm not an expert at that. And we had experts at that, but helped them to really speak the brand language. And in doing so, you essentially, again, you create an army of ambassadors. So understand what that onboarding looks like across every single department. understanding what kind of person thrives in the culture within an org. That's also going to help you as you're seeking to hire and expand your team, as you're sussing out folks who maybe are not a good fit for the organization, particularly if you're new to the team and you're in a leadership position and have been tasked with like up-leveling the talent in your team. Understanding the culture and what it takes to succeed there is really, really important. And I think biggest people priorities, just like, hey, what's on your mind? Is it pay equity? Is it new benefits packages? Is it paths to growth for individuals? Is it, I can't think of that. I'm not thinking of everything off the top of my head, but just like, again, like, what is it that you are prioritizing? Number one, there are oftentimes a lot of great stories to tell there. Sally was a great example. We had minimum pay at our store level team members that was much higher than competitors. And it was a terrific story to be able to tell, both on the trade side and to build consumer affinity. Yeah. So
I love that. So what is one of the most surprising, oh my gosh, moments that you've had on a curiosity tour with any department?
Gosh, one of the most surprising things. I think I won't say where, but I found a group of people who just really hated what we were doing. Just hated it from a marketing standpoint. They hated all of it. Like, this is terrible and we hate it. And it was like, whoa, what? Why? Why do you hate this so much? And I came to understand that they hated it because they felt like it was not real, that it wasn't authentic and true, and it didn't reflect their own experiences of the brand. And there was a lot of truth in it. It was admittedly biased, and we came to a really, really good place after I really kind of dug in to try to understand. We were making changes on that side of things anyway, but having the humility to say, like, well, tell me more about that, instead of being offended, instead of being hurt, instead of getting defensive about it. It's like, okay, well, there's a reason here. Talk to me about it. Tell me why, and how can I make that better? Or if I can't make it better, if I don't think it's a good idea to make it better, how can I better explain to you why we're doing what we're doing? So that even if you don't necessarily agree with it, you at least understand why that way. And that is a key important thing. You're not always going to agree with everybody. That's okay. But if they feel like they've been heard and that you are genuinely understanding their perspective, and you're saying, I'm going to make a different decision. Here are all the reasons why. Getting to that level of respect is crucial.
I love this show so much today. I love the topic so much. And why is because this curiosity tour that you've been deploying for years and years and years, I think also, and we talked about this, but I just want to reiterate it. It makes marketers ask stronger, strategic questions. You're not going to go in and ask, what do you think about the direct mail campaign? That is not going to, help you build, the strategic reputation that marketing needs right now. You've got to elevate those questions. And that is really going to help, I think, position marketers, with a seat at the table, not 1, 2, or 3, or 4 layers down.
Yep.
So many things that we've talked about today. You've been absolutely amazing. As you know, we launched a Better At series this year to help marketers really sharpen their everyday skills and make a difference. It could be things like listening, collaborating, prioritizing, or communicating with impact. So I have to ask you, Nicole, what's the one thing that you've learned that's made you better at and really being able to measure a difference in how you lead work and show up in your role?
Yeah, it's a real simple one for me. It is learning to admit when I don't know something.
Love it.
I think when we're early on in our career, there's a lot of fake it till you make it. It's kind of a necessary thing that you do when you're just starting out and you're more junior, you're getting to learn stuff. You're like, yep, no problem. And then you go away and you scuttle around and figure out how to make it happen. There's a point at which the decisions that you make can have massive ramifications within the company. And so pretending to know more than you do, pretending to be more certain than you are, can actually be very dangerous. And so being vulnerable enough to say, I really don't know the answer to that. Let's dig in on this together. Let's figure out what the best solution is going to be, instead of pretending that you know it all and you've got all the answers.
And it doesn't help you build that trust and influence, which you and I both know is so important, and you mentioned earlier.
Because nobody believes anybody knows everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Being willing to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's go find out together. It creates camaraderie. It creates a sense of trust. And it also, I think, helps you relieve yourself of the burden of having to feel like you have to solve everything in a silo or that you have to have all those answers. We're human. We don't. Business is complicated. The world is complicated. Let's not link arms and go figure it out together.
Yeah, I love it. We could talk for hours, but we both have to go, don't we? What is the best way for our audience to get in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Nicole Portwood. I'm pretty easy to find. I have social media accounts, but I'm not super active on other social. LinkedIn is probably the best place, and I'm happy to connect, happy to answer questions. I love talking about this stuff. I love marketing as work. I love the work of marketing, and I love that it keeps me, even at this point in my career, curious about so many things and learning every single day about things. And it's part of what I think sort of a downstream impact is the joy you get from continuing to learn if you are this and curious wherever you are.
I totally agree. You have been an absolute joy today. Thank you so much for your appearance today on StrategyCast. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, you can email me, Lori, Lori, at strategycast.com. Nicole Portwood, thank you, my friend. You are absolutely amazing.
Oh, thank you so much, Lori. It's been such a pleasure. I'd love to talk to you again anytime.
We will.
All right. Take care.
You too.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.